Okay, I have the wonderful Rachel here. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really, really excited to have you here.
Thanks, Claire. I'm so excited. It's such a privilege to, be interviewed by you today. I'm really excited to share our story.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think your story is so unique again. I mean, every story is unique, and I love that we can just share the layers of this journey because it's just never ending. And you have a beautiful boy, beautiful deaf boy called Tiger. And Tiger has ANSD, which is something that I'm really interested to unpack with you a little bit more because there'll be a lot of people who may not know what ANSD is, particularly when you're first on this journey. That's something that's really, really new, and it's not something you know a lot about. So I think that would be a really cool topic for us to unpack a little bit more. But there's so much more to him than that, and there's so much that you've been through since first finding out that Tiger was deaf, and I think I always ask parents, and it's the same sort of routine every time because I think we have to go back to the start. We have to go back to where it all began because that's where this journey really kicked off for you. And so I would love for you to share, I guess, the moment you first, or before, wherever you feel is the best starting point, but the moment you sort of first learned, or you first had an inkling, or there was discussion about the fact that Tiger may be deaf, and what that was like for you. Talk us through it.
Yeah, so it was almost 2.5 years ago now. So we had absolutely no inkling at all, very naive to what was ahead. Tiger is our first and only child, so we were completely fresh into it, doe-eyed and not knowing what was coming. So he was diagnosed at 5.5 weeks old. We had had 3 attempts at the newborn hearing screening in hospital. The stay that we had in hospital was actually because of me, not for him. So we just thought he was, perfect little baby boy. It was very much downplayed when he didn't pass those 3 tests. I'm sure every parent almost that I've talked to hears the same thing, that it's very normal. There's probably fluid. Don't worry about it. It's all good. He'll be fine. So then we had a follow-up diagnostic appointment when he was 4 weeks old. And it was really interesting because during that appointment, which went for quite some time, and it was actually my first venture out of the house by myself, which was a bit scary in itself, not really knowing what that was going to be like. So during that appointment, they told me they could get some readings on his hearing, but then they couldn't get any readings on some others. So they called us back for another appointment the following week. We were again reassured, everything's fine. Don't worry about it. Everyone's overreacting. Nothing's wrong with him. Until, of course, curveball, there was something wrong. So we went into the secondary diagnostic appointment, and I probably thought we'd be in for an hour. They'd just do it again and see you later. Just a tick box type of an exercise. But after 4 hours, we left with the diagnosis that he was bilaterally severe, profound levels of hearing loss. So just shock, immediate shock, like the ground's just been pulled out from underneath you.
Yeah. And when you were in the hospital, did they say anything to you? So once you sort of found out that, you discovered that was where you were at with him, what sort of was the next protocol? What did they tell you? What advice did they give you? Was there anything that really resonated in that time?
A lot of it, those little details do remain a bit of a blur, but there was talks immediately of that we would be contacted by Hearing Australia and he would get hearing aids. And, it's funny because in that moment that seemed so shocking and confronting, a set of hearing aids. And now that's nothing. But I just then imagined this tiny, precious baby with, hearing aids, and just thought, wow, like who would have thought this is what we would be facing at 5 weeks old.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like that's, you weren't even having the conversations around cochlear implantation or anything at that point. And it just shows that the journey just goes and weaves and changes so constantly, particularly when our kids, like there's still so much diagnostics to be done. And that was the case with Tiger, because at this point, I guess you knew that he was bilaterally deaf, but you were not sure of the cause at this point. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So we went through, many months of diagnostic testing, and also the MRIs and CT scans. And what was really interesting with him is when he had the MRI done, which was probably at about 9 weeks old, the ENT said everything looked perfectly normal. So then they called for a CT scan, which happened, he's probably about 14 weeks, so a few weeks later. And it was only then that they discovered that he has very narrow auditory nerves. So the cochlea and everything's formed, but it's the nerve that is his cause. We had the Christmas holidays in there as well, and the ENT takes an extended break over Christmas. So we would have had the CT scan at 5 months old, and we actually didn't get his diagnosis of ANSD until he was just over 7.5 months old. So it was a big gap between.
Oh, wow. Wow. And that's, I know it always seems to happen that way when you're desperate for this information and then they go on holidays. And I mean, everyone needs a holiday, but I feel like it always seems to happen. We were in the middle of COVID when that all happened with Frankie, and everything just took so much longer and we just couldn't get any information. And it was just wild. And he was a bit older, but it was just, yeah, I still remember it. So it can just be, it's such a waiting game. And just for those who don't know, what is ANSD from your perspective? What do you know about it?
I probably won't explain it very well, but the way it's been explained to me is that it can cause distortion of the sound message going through to the brain. It is a spectrum disorder, so there can be a whole number of, I guess, reasons as to why. But I have listened to a few simulations where I guess I would describe it as it's almost like there's radio noise over the top of sound, so making it really hard to discriminate the different sounds.
Yeah, and I find it's a real challenge for families sometimes, because ANSD, auditory neuropathy spectrum disorder, it fluctuates as well. And so, some days you feel like your child's accessing really, fantastic input through their devices, and then other days they're not. And it's that just constant change. And that can happen with deaf kids in general, but I do find there's that added layer of just sort of not really ever really knowing how much they're accessing. And then you've obviously got the thin nerves on top of that. And so there's just so much unknown, I guess, for that. And I guess in those first months really, after finding out about all this and sort of settling into these diagnoses, he's got his devices. What were the main challenges moving through that first year or two with him? What did you find most challenging?
So definitely when you mentioned the fluctuation, and it's interesting because before we knew about his ANSD diagnosis, I thought I was going insane, because some days I would feel like he could hear really well, and some days we really noticed that there was a significant difference. So once we got that diagnosis, it was kind of like, okay, this makes sense, and this isn't us just being a little bit silly, I guess. But yeah, some of the challenges, like most people, juggling, especially as a first-time mum, the juggle of trying to learn about a newborn and keeping them alive and healthy whilst you're trying to take them to all of these appointments. There was one patch of time where he was like in 6 appointments a week. It was just insane. And a lot of that was to do with the hearing aid molds, and how many times in that sort of like 3 to 5 months of life, how quickly they grow and the amount of molds you have to have done. It's challenging. And also the speed at which you want to make decisions, but obviously you're held to other people's timelines. So yeah, I think that was a bit of a challenge for us, and we really wanted to give him everything and and every opportunity, but you can only do what you can do when you're not the medical professional.
Oh yeah, that's such a good point. I never think about that we have like these decisions we have to make. They're very fast decisions, but then we have to wait. And it's the waiting. You're like, we've made this decision, or we're waiting for information so we can make that decision. And I think that that's sometimes can be the most frustrating part of that whole thing. And I guess for you through that, you discovered Auslan or sign language at this point, or were you sort of just still were they just all just talking about speech and getting him into therapy and all that sort of stuff?
So we were mostly really supported to take whatever path we wanted. One particular interaction that really sticks with me was that at our 6-week checkup, which was days after he was diagnosed, we happened to be paired up with a GP who is an Auslan interpreter, or had been an interpreter in the past. And so he had a bit of a special interest in it. But he flagged with us early, and it's confusing to the way he explained it, but it probably makes more sense now we get further down. He said to us, he's not going to be a hearing person. If you have devices, he may not fit into the deaf world. So make sure you don't leave him in the middle. And that was a bit confusing for us as to, well, what path do we choose? He's not hearing, but he has his device, he'll have devices, but so confusing, especially so early on. But I think it brought to the front of our minds that there were going to be lots of opinions on what we decided to do. But we just had to do what was right for us. So we started with very basic Auslan signs, only just a handful, probably up until the ANSD diagnosis, when cochlear implants were more on the table than what they had been before. But once we had decided that implanting was the way to go for our family, we just went hell for leather with Auslan. So he was about sort of 8 months old once we really started to get on with learning. And I think we sort of started to come out of the really fogginess of that diagnostic and testing type of a period. So we could input something new into our routine.
That is just so refreshing to have a GP with that lens, and just to be able to, at least, even if they weren't able to explain it in the way that made sense at the time, just really making it clear that, your child will never be a hearing person. And I think that that's sometimes something parents aren't always aware of, or aren't really understanding, because they're promised so much at the start that with devices they will be just like their hearing peers in every way. And I think that can just lead parents down a very different path, where they don't feel that there is any other option. And I just love that you were sort of given that, even though at the time it probably didn't make a lot of sense, now it does. And I guess that's like anything, you receive this advice, you sit on it, you talk to more people, and then it all sort of, the fogginess clears, and it makes a lot more sense for you. I guess my next question would be Tiger. So he's 2.5. And how's he going? How's his language? How's he sort of operating in this world now? You mentioned cochlear implantation, so has that happened? And
he's absolutely amazing. And it's funny because early days, I couldn't imagine post-diagnosis him doing things that typical kids do. It was just this real roadblock for me. I just couldn't see that positive into the future. Now, oh my God, he gives them all a run for their money. He is just amazing. So yes, he had his right side implanted at 8.5 months old. So things moved quite quickly after he did get the ANSD diagnosis. I think it was 3 weeks post official diagnosis to being implanted, which is amazing. And then his left side, he had done it 18 months after quite a few ear infections. But yeah, look, that's been going really well. Auslan is his primary language, which is amazing. He surprises me every day with the things he comes out with, and the complex concepts that he comes out with. So yeah, he's doing great. And we've taken that bilingual approach with him, and we just want him to be able to choose. You know, we're very realistic that one day he might decide he doesn't want to wear his implants anymore, and that's completely fine. But for us, you know, we needed to make that choice, that early choice for him to at minimum give him you know, opportunities in the future, because at his levels there was not a lot of functional hearing. So this has given him an opportunity, at least for safety, you know, if he can, you know, hear an alarm or a car or whatever it might be, you know, that's a real win for us.
Yeah, it sounds like you've taken a really holistic approach with him, and you've made Auslan a really, I guess, critical part for his development, and he's just attached to that beautifully. And I mean, just, you know, talking about the complexity of concepts that he's bringing out, 2.5, it just shows you the impact language input, not just speech input, but just linguistic input in general, when we give it to them in that really rich, accessible way, how much it can do for them. I know from my experience going down this path on the bilingual route, there is advocacy involved, because not everyone understands it and not everyone sees it as necessary when there's devices involved, particularly cochlear implants. They see cochlear implants as replacing a signed language when we're really talking about a tool and a language. So I guess my next question is, because we've mentioned off air, I guess you could say, around your advocacy in the public healthcare space and how that's been. And I'd love you to talk a little bit more about that and what your experience has been like advocating for him over the last couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. So we live in an area where options are limited in terms of specialists and who's available. You know, we don't get the smorgasbord of choice between different people. So we went through the public system for implantation and then, I guess, initial mapping. But what I guess I'd like to talk about is, yeah, around that mapping process and I guess the challenges that we had and how we sort of overcame that. So with ANSD, you know, it is a very unique beast. I mean, every child with a hearing loss, you know, there's challenges that are associated with it, but it is definitely very specialized. So we felt initially that the audiologists that were performing the mapping weren't taking his ANSD into account. And I can say that with confidence because it was never mentioned once to us, either in the pre-implantation sort of, I guess, counselling type of a phase or post in any of the mapping. And because I'd done some background research into it, I knew it was a specific condition that needed a little bit of extra care. So after a few months of his first ear being done, he was doing really great in terms of detecting sounds, but there just wasn't a whole lot being converted into, that initial babbling and those kinds of sounds that, you really look out for. And then I'd done some reading. It was around the same time that the cases in South Australia and Queensland of the kids that had unfortunately been affected negatively by the public system, which was just absolutely devastating.
Tragic, yeah.
Awful. And I just couldn't get it out of the back of my mind. You know, when you just get that mum gut feeling and you just go, I just don't know if this is right.
We always talk about that feeling, particularly on this journey, and how powerful it is, and we just have to listen to it. Oof.
Yep, you have to trust your gut. So anyway, we got to a point where we were still waiting on the second ear to be done, but we requested a review of his map because we weren't satisfied that the people mapping him were tailoring it to suit him. So it ended up being reviewed by an independent group, and then at our next mapping session, those the recommendations were made, and there was quite a few of them. There was nothing. I had it also then reviewed by someone else because I wanted to make sure we were covering all the bases.
Good job.
And then it was hard, but very worth it. So then in his next mapping, they made the adjustments, and I kid you not, Claire, within 2 days, he started babbling ba, 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 ba. 2 days of having these changes made. And that made me go, okay, you weren't being super overprotective or being silly. You picked up that your child was capable of more and that people weren't doing the right thing by him, and you've made a change. So it was really empowering, as hard as it was to do, because as a parent, I'm not a healthcare professional and I'm there trying to tell a healthcare professional you're not doing your job properly. That's intimidating.
I think so intuitive of you, and we have every right to question decisions made by healthcare professionals. And I think we're not denying that they know a lot, and we're not denying that they are, their job is their bread and butter for sure. But there is an element of complacency in the medical field sometimes, and dismissal, and this idea of we've done this a million times and therefore you don't really know and you just leave it to us. And I think that would have been a really, as you said, intimidating and overwhelming conversation to have, and to actually question something like that. But wow, what an impact and what a change that's made. And sometimes we just have to push ourselves. We always talk about pushing ourselves through that comfort zone and just little by little having these conversations, because it can mean long-term change for our kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it just gave us the confidence to know that we are in tune with our child. So when he had the second ear done, which was probably 2.5 months after this had happened, 2 weeks after he was switched on, we pulled the pin on the public system and went with a private provider, and we've never looked back. So we did need to get that second ear done. So we sort of had to, I don't like to say it, but we had to play the game a bit to get what we needed done, because, as I said, we don't have the opportunity to pick and choose, who did that. And don't get me wrong, the person who implanted him, incredible. She's amazing, and we're very grateful for her. It was just obviously that the mapping didn't work out. So it was one of the hardest, but one of the best things that we've done for him.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I can imagine that wasn't an easy decision, because sometimes it can feel like you are connected to that ENT as well after such a big journey with them, and to then move out of that space can feel odd. But I think that's just so indicative of that advocacy that we need to be doing, and to trust our gut, and to know that you are the expert of your child. If you're noticing there's a difference, and it happens with Frankie all the time, and there's things I've missed with Frank just because sometimes you are too close to it. But a lot of the time it's like you see such a difference. I've seen a difference in his map recently where we've had to go back because I'm like, yeah, something's not quite clicking here. And it's that just becoming really, firstly being really in tune with them, but then also having the confidence to be like, no, I feel like there is something wrong here. I am going to raise it, and not just leave it, because it can actually be can change the whole trajectory for you guys. And so now, how's the support system around him at the moment? Are you pretty happy with it?
Yeah, we feel like we've really got the A team around him now. And in the last year, we've really tried to lean on the support. So our teacher of the deaf, that team have been amazing in giving him support in daycare, so that he's getting, signed language every day that he's there, in addition to his educators that are learning. We've also brought another speechy on board, thankfully due to a friend who I've made through our journey. She got us onto a local speechy who also signs, which for our area is almost impossible. She opened her books because she's got an interest in Auslan, so she let us in. And he, when you take your deaf or hard of hearing child to an appointment where you need them to perform, whether it's vocalizing or signing or whichever, or both together, and you just can't get them to do what you need them to do in that moment. He goes to this appointment with this speechy, anything you could ever want him to do, and he just knocks it out of the park. He just vibes with her and she's just been the best addition to the team, to the village, and it's made a huge difference to his language this year.
Wow, we always, oh, it's such a lovely story because we always talk about that too, is that an aligned village is critical. So critical. And our kids need to mesh with these people. It can't just be, obviously living in the area you don't have choice, but if you can manage to find a therapist that really gets your kid and your child just melds with them, it's just such a game changer. And I've had situations personally where I've had to end services with the therapist because it's just, I can just see it's not compatible, and having to move in, same with ENTs. I've gone through a few ENTs. I know a lot of families who are the same. And I think sometimes we feel that guilt, like, oh, we've been with this person for so long, we don't want to leave them. Like, we feel like we owe that therapist something, but at the end of the day, it has to come back to our kids and what works for them best. And if it's not working, we change it. And I think that's just so lovely because it enhances their language in such a different way. Okay, so before we move into just having some advice for other families, because I'm sure you have a lot of stuff that you could share, even in 2 years, there's still so much that happens in that short amount of time. Have there been any major wins on the journey for you, either back in the day or recently, that you think would be nice to share? I think to give hope for other families too. Sometimes these wins are really nice for those at the start of the journey. Is there anything that stands out?
Yeah, for me, as I said before, our Auslan, we didn't start signing, aggressively from birth, but that's progressed over time. But one thing that I really wanted to be able to do for my son to, I guess, show that we are fostering an inclusive world for him was I really wanted to get to a point where I could have a conversation with a deaf person who uses Auslan only, and to be able to have that confidently, because I didn't want a deaf person to walk up to my child, see that he was wearing hearing aids or cochlear implants, and assume we signed, but maybe we didn't. So I really, really wanted to be able to do that. We have a wonderful Auslan tutor, and she's deaf and she signs. And a couple of weeks ago, I was able to have a really in-depth conversation with her, with some finger spelling thrown in there, and granted, she slows it down. But it was the first time that I sort of thought to myself, wow, you've nailed it. You are having a conversation without an interpreter, as solo as I can. And yeah, jumping around topics and not just talking about one basic thing. So I just felt that was such a personal win for me. I just really wanted to be able to do that and show my son that, we are inclusive. So yeah, it was really a big pat on the back type of moment.
Oh, that's such a win. And I feel like that's such a goal for so many parents, right? At the very beginning, where they're trying to firstly, they think that their signing's never going to be good enough, which I need to stress right now that should never, ever cross anyone's mind, because there's so much research coming out now that hearing parents signing to their children makes so much more impact than they think. It's not about being the fluent model. At the beginning, particularly, that's not your job. Your job is to bridge communication and just have a relationship with your child. And that's what language is there for. And in whatever form that comes in, that's beautiful. But I love that. I know so many who have that goal, is to be like, oh, just one day I want to be able to have a conversation with a deaf person, and to just achieve that. It's a really beautiful milestone to achieve on this signing journey, because it can feel like so far away. But then when it happens, sometimes you don't realize until afterwards. And then you're like, oh my goodness, I just did that. That was wild. And that will just continue to grow. And it also helps with your confidence, right? Where you're like, okay, well, that was great. And that's signing with a familiar person. And then the more deaf people you sort of bring into your circle, slowly but surely it will build. And I think that's such a nice win to share with families who might be still at the start of a journey, thinking, am I ever going to get there? And I think, yeah, you will. And 2.5 years in, and that's what you're achieving. That's brilliant. Like, you should be very, very proud of that. That's awesome. I thought we might end, because we'll have to wrap up soon, just with some final advice that you might have. Any nuggets of wisdom you'd like to share with our families who might be listening, tuning in. This podcast sort of reaches lots of different corners of the world. So it'd be lovely for you to sort of just share your experience and anything you think might be nice for them to know.
Yeah, definitely. So number one would be find the village and hang on to them and hold them close. It took me probably a year in to find some other families. I probably pushed it away a little bit to start with for just fear of what the future looked like. As soon as we let them in, it's just been wonderful. And I'm sure they'll listen and they'll know exactly who they are. And I love you all. But definitely there's, support in numbers, definitely. And we're all on slightly different journeys, but yeah, it's just a different form of connectedness that you can't really explain. It's great.
Oh, that's beautifully said. I couldn't agree more. That's such a strong thing for people to understand on this journey, for sure.
Yeah. Secondly, that no one's going to be a bigger advocate than you. You've got to be the voice for your child. And it's okay to, I learned from you, Claire, it's okay to save your, advocacy energy for the big things. You don't have to fight every single little battle that comes your way, but really making the most of it when it is crunch time is really important. And just finally that it won't, it's early days, you think it's never going to end and it's just going to be scary and big and new forever, but it does get better. And everyone tells you that first year is really hard and then it gets better. And I didn't believe people because I thought, nah, it's going to be shit forever, basically. But yeah, I'm like, what are you talking about? But you get through that initial, all of the hectic appointments and the diagnostic stuff. And then you start to just see your child for the beautiful, perfect little person that they are.
Oh, absolutely. And it's such a privilege, right? It is such a privilege to raise these kids, and just you don't realize how lucky you are when you give birth to this child and you're going through this whirlwind. But honestly, I would not have it any other way. And I know that you would be the same, because they bring in such a rich language, culture, community of people you would never have known if you didn't sort of fall into this journey. So I love that advice. I think it's just so good, and it echoes in so much of what we talk about, and the conversations I have with other families. So I really, really appreciate you giving that advice and sharing your story today, and Tiger's story. You're incredible. You're doing a wonderful job. And thank you.
No problem. Thanks, Claire, for having me. It's been great.
Okay.